Well, it took 18 years, but we finally got a chance to dive into World of Warcraft with the new Dragonflight expansion. This is the first time I've ever gotten a chance to experience World of Warcraft in its entirety for the first time. I grew up extremely poor, so I couldn't afford a PC, let alone the $15 subscription just to play World of Warcraft. And I was a closet hater. Anybody that played World of Warcraft, I was judging you, and for that, I'm sorry. But I will say, after 18 years, we finally got to dive into World of Warcraft, so this video is going to be my review as a brand new player. Now, because I am a brand new player to World of Warcraft with the Dragonflight expansion, I'm looking at the game through a very different lens than a seasoned player who has likely experienced the majority of the game and has a lot to compare to. I got the chance to experience everything pretty much blind, so because of that, my experience and my perspective on the game is going to be different, so please take it with a grain of salt if you are a veteran player. I'm just looking at it through the lens of a new World of Warcraft player. And if you want to discuss World of Warcraft, the comments below are available. I would love to discuss World of Warcraft. Now, quick before I do begin this video, I would love to say thank you to Asmongold. Asmongold, I was watching you during your Shadowlands in 2020. I was just finishing up my chemotherapy sessions and I was in remission from Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I would be in bed watching you experience the game and having all of these open discussions, and I thought to myself, man, he really is talking so candidly about the game and discussing all the great things about it, things that could be improved on, things that he just didn't like, and that really opened up my eyes to wanting to play World of Warcraft for the first time. Realistically, you were one of the largest reasons why I finally dove into World of Warcraft. So Asmongold, if you are getting a chance to see this or you're watching this video with your stream or on YouTube, thank you for being the reason why I jumped into World of Warcraft, because realistically, without you, I probably would not have done it. So thank you from a cancer survivor to you. I appreciate you for being the catalyst for me jumping into this game. So one of the things that I first saw as soon as we jumped in was the massive server list that was in the game. And I was kind of shocked how many servers there were. I mean, it doesn't really mean too much for me who is a new player to have to choose something. I could really just choose anything at that point. But to go with a higher population in case there were things in game that I needed, I figured having a larger population meant that at least I was supported in-game from other players than to jump into a new server and potentially not have any support at all. Now, the character creation overview was insane. The sheer level of character customization is absolutely wonderful, and I really felt like it made me feel like the character you make stands out for a purpose between what class you're playing, what role you want to take on. If I wasn't really already locked into Drakthir Evoker, I could easily see myself spending hours upon hours in the collection screen, customizing every class and applying them to a server just to save a username and a design, even if I wasn't even going to use it yet. And with that, creating the new Evoker was actually pretty amazing. The amount of customization options for both your Evoker and your Visage made me feel like the character that I created was actually an extension of my own fantasies and how I wanted to explore the World of Warcraft, and I hadn't even jumped into the world yet. I just was making a character. I was kind of a tad bit sad that it wasn't entirely free customization, just because color presets were selected for you and you didn't really have unlimited RGB colors, but the color meshing for what you were allowed to have wasn't really bad overall, and I was actually pleasantly satisfied with the choices. Jumping into the tutorial area, there was a lot to unpack from the tutorial as soon as you log in for the first time. And it's definitely obvious that Blizzard tried to allow new players to learn and understand core mechanics of the game in step-by-step fashion, such as basic attacks, hotkeys, quest icons, collecting materials, like whatever it could have been. What I felt really stood out here was the fact that as a level 58 starting Evoker, you actually grow with your character compared to other games or maybe even other WoW classes where if you start at a really high level instead of level 1, you're just given all of your attacks and skills and kind of left to your own on how to customize your setup, which I felt would be extremely overwhelming for a new player. It was a huge breath of fresh air to actually start with a few basic attacks and then learn to use and customize my Evoker from day one use. I can only imagine how a new player would feel if they tried any other class where 20 or 30 different hotkeys would be available literally from day one, and just how overwhelming that actually would be. Side note, by the way, cutscenes, fantastic. Whoever's making those, keep making them. I'm just saying, moving on. So one thing I've always known that World of Warcraft has always been huge on is questing and its importance into how you play the game. It realistically is the catalyst for like level progression, item collection, upgrading your character over time. So it was really noticeable that questing was really what they wanted you to do compared to almost any other side thing like crafting or other professions that you could have done. And I did run into a few hit or misses. Unfortunately, there were a few instances where I would jump into a quest, I would try to log into a dungeon finder, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But unfortunately, when I would log into the dungeon finder, finish the dungeon, and then jump back into what I was doing, the quest would soft lock, it wouldn't progress. I had to abandon the quest in order to go back, pick it up again, and then be able to finish it. Now, even though that was a few times, it was very hit or miss, it still felt very good to do quests, and it actually felt like I was immersing in the story and the world in itself, compared to just doing a quest for the sake of doing a quest. The vibe and the flow of the character actually felt like I meshed with the rest of the characters in the open world, and that my character actually had like a ton of meaning compared to just being a character that I was just using over time. So one of the things I really loved was the flight path system in World of Warcraft. Obviously, it is a shared mechanic that many other MMOs have adopted kind of in their own way, but I immediately made it a mission to want to open every possible flight master that I would come across, so I didn't have to hoof it on foot to get where I needed to be. Not to mention the actual flights itself allowed me to sit back and just enjoy the level atmosphere and the total immersion, which kind of leads me into my next topic, which was open world. So one of the things that I really do love about games like MMOs or something like that is just the open world expansiveness that you are able to enjoy. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of times I've played any game whatsoever that calls itself open world. They give you this huge expansive world with beautiful architecture and design and just vastness, and then you have nothing to do in it at all. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of games where they give you this expansive world, nothing to do in it, nothing to explore. It's just a large world to be a large world. I didn't get that feeling here with World of Warcraft. There was so much to do between finding other players that are doing other things within the world, side bosses and questing, small little tiny things to go explore with, hidden little areas to go find, and just the sheer change of the environment in itself made me feel like my character needed to go find different parts of the open world to go explore just in case there was something I might have missed. I was constantly jumping onto my Drake and side hopping over different areas. Even if I was in the middle of a quest, something would have caught my eye and I'm just like, I'm straight gone. I was right into it. I don't know if it's just because I'm a new player, but the low poly mesh kind of the world, obviously decreasing system requirements because it's not as graphically intensive, but they work exactly well with what they have and they make it meaningful. The design variants, the color contrasting, just everything in general, open world just was such a fun, great experience to have, and I felt like I just had to explore. One thing I do know WoW is famous for is its add-ons. I didn't start using add-ons at first just because I felt like the learning curve or, you know, what you have, how to use them. So at first I was just extremely weary and almost didn't use any at all. It took extreme amounts of discussions with other people in-game and friends to choose a few like details, bartender, and even then, I still had issues with conflicting add-ons blocking each other at times, and as a new player, I feel like that was just a little bit of a hindrance. Realistically, if you are a new World of Warcraft player who is just jumping into Dragonflight, you don't need add-ons to enjoy the experience of the game. You actually could just play the game in its vanilla form and then use add-ons later on, and you would not have any hindrance to your experience at all. Traditionally, weapons and armor in different games have a long history of just becoming super useless after you collect kind of like the next rare item and stuff. With World of Warcraft, I didn't really feel like that was actually the case. Now, sure, it did happen if I collected a more rare item. I naturally wanted to fall into the notion of equipping it, but WoW actually made me stop and think about each item and then how it played into the character stats regardless of its rarity. The item level and the stats it provided made me feel like each piece kind of melded where it was supposed to be at the time compared to its rarity, and it never really was a concern for me, so I just kind of looked forward to what items were coming up next. The new Drake system and flying around the world was fucking bonkers. Even if it was 30 feet away, I wanted to get on my Drake, jump in the air, and then just slam down like an absolute badass. The Drake system, I think, was incredible, and the fact that we could customize its appearance and then upgrade its effectiveness by finding glyphs made it feel like its purpose wasn't inhibited where you were. I do know for a fact, though, that many players probably ran off and then just found all the glyphs so they could just fly anywhere with lower cooldowns, but the fact that players even have the opportunity to make that choice alone tells me that the Drake system is diverse enough for any player, even new players, to enjoy. The activity finder was a little bit hit or miss. I love the features of it. I think the fact that I can find a group for any mid-game and end-game activity from questing to raids, I think that's great. But the queue times are just unbelievably atrocious at times. I don't know if it's because I was purely choosing DPS or the population density was bad or whatever have you, but if it said I had an 8-minute queue time, I could realistically triple that number and likely still be waiting in the queue. Still, I am just happy that the matchmaking system was actually in the game for new players to feel kind of inclusive compared to just veteran players who have already experienced this before. So from my understanding, the edit mode is a brand new system built into Dragonflight, and you can easily tell that it was kind of inspired by what has been going on with Final Fantasy XIV. I don't know if that was directly derivative of that or whatever, but it very much uses some of the same core functions as what happens in Final Fantasy XIV. I would find myself going back into the HUD layout system constantly in World of Warcraft and changing the way that things were moving around in order to better complement my playstyle. I do know add-ons affect the edit mode's functions, but I primarily played Dragonflight in its vanilla form, so the edit mode really wasn't too much of an issue for me. For somebody who is jumping into World of Warcraft for the first time with Dragonflight, it could be a little daunting to have to figure out what would work best for somebody's playstyle, but I really do feel like the edit mode is a great welcome addition that somebody will just naturally grow with over time. For the talent tree system, thank God that the talent tree system has a recommended function. I had a serious love-hate relationship with it. I absolutely loved the talent tree system, and then seeing how I could truly build my evoker in any way that I wanted to. Damn it if it's not the most intimidating system for a new player to see at first glance. There's just so much to unpack on first glance, which is why I feel like veteran players will understand it significantly better. So for that, I just stayed within the recommended choices, and I just let that work through with my first playthrough. I do believe this is a system that a lot of new players will likely spend a lot of time trying to work with, but again, it is a little daunting having to see all of these different customizable options and having to think about what loadouts would work with. And if you're a new player just jumping into the game for the first time, you're probably better off just using the recommended settings. Achievements are always a nice way to see things popping up on the screen and then give you that little bit of dose of serotonin to make you feel good about progressing through the game. I really did enjoy that the achievement window really made you know what quests you needed to do and then how to get them done in order to get that achievement. For a new player like me, I did feel bad kind of reading through the achievements and then realizing how much I missed out on over the last 18 years, but apparently I can just head over to Stormwind and pick up the storyline quests to play through the game in its entirety. So at least the FOMO really isn't that much of an impact. Dungeons were by and far my favorite activity in the entirety of the Dragonflight campaign. Each one was unique in its own way, where some, like the Ruby Life Pools, you're just doing a linear storyline, but in the no-cut aggressive, you're actually able to go off and do them in pretty much any order that you want. The loot system for killing bosses is very traditional of an MMO, did not bother me in any sleight hand. I was able to know that if I didn't get something, I was able to go back into the dungeon and go do it again and have a higher chance of just going and getting what I wanted from that boss. The fact that replayability in dungeons is one of the core focuses of World of Warcraft is such a breath of fresh air compared to other games where you can only run them one and done. I love the fact that dungeons give you an opportunity to go off and just do a thing. So overall, as a brand new player, my experience with Dragonflight was absolutely fantastic. This has hands down been one of my favorite MMO experiences across the board. The fact that as a new player, I was able to jump in, feel like I really truly belong, just like any veteran player who's experienced the last 18 years of content. I didn't feel like I left out, even though I know for a fact that I missed so many different expansions and storylines that really helped to build Dragonflight into what it is today, especially with the player feedback that I know the World of Warcraft community has been giving to Blizzard over the last few years, if not the whole decade. I do know that third-party apps like Addons, Wowhead, Icy Veins, all of that stuff has been really crucial, but I didn't really feel like it was necessary. I was just able to go enjoy vanilla WoW for Dragonflight, and then my experience was just unbelievably fantastic. If there was any critique that I could give to the WoW Dragonflight campaign, it's that the learning curve is extremely strong if you are either new to MMOs, new to WoW, a mixture of both, or you're just really on the fence about trying to do things in the game the way that you feel might be best. I think one of the things that I've noticed is the reason why they're starting to put things like edit mode and first-party content into the game is because the game itself is so reliant on third-party applications like Wowhead, Icy Veins, Off Research, whatever you want to do, the add-ons that you're going to put into the game. They really do make or break your entire experience with World of Warcraft at this point. I also didn't really have to touch on things like crafting or other progressions like fishing or whatever. They weren't necessary to the core aspects of the game, so it felt to me like they were just kind of there as novelty options, but I didn't need to do them, and frankly, I kind of don't want to because I don't see the integral impact because they didn't explain it to me. They're just there for me to choose if I wanted to at some point. And I think the last part that really kind of left me a sour taste was the end of the campaign. It's almost like it just stopped dead in its tracks. We see this progression with Razageth going up, being this badass dragon that we see her to be, and then all of a sudden, at the end of the campaign, she just flies off into the nothing, and she's still alive, and we're just kind of there talking about how she's no longer this threat. I don't know if it's me or whatever, but I really felt like that left me wanting more, which isn't bad, don't get me wrong, but it made me feel like the raid became, at the end of the endgame, just became much more of a requirement to feel like I'm tying up the campaign that should have been finished when the last main campaign quest for Dragonflight was actually underway. If I had to give Dragonflight a score between 1 and 10, I would give it a solid 8.5. You really are able to enjoy this game in its entirety if you do the vanilla WoW version and you just want to play through the Dragonflight campaign with what it gives you. You're going to have a fantastic time. And of course, if you're somebody who wants to immediately dive into add-ons and other content to be able to help expand your experience, it's not hard to go learn on it, but you will have a bit of a learning curve and you're going to have a lot of time invested before you really dive in and enjoy Dragonflight in its fullest. But realistically, if you are looking for a solid MMO experience, Dragonflight is, especially for a new player, for you. Guys, thank you so much for watching this again. If you have enjoyed this content, please like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching this video. From one new Dragonflight player in World of Warcraft to any veteran players who might be watching, thank you for letting me play your game and experiencing this for the first time. Thank you for being the reason I get to do what I do. Without you guys, I could not do this, and without you guys, I am nothing. And until the next video, game on.